the insidious nature of these social dynamics and power structure presents in ways that are massively disadvantaged to people of color, but especially the black community. And that presents at least something that I've been explaining and exploring is the concept of black anxiety. And it dovetails into how we start to define the concept of privilege. Because privilege isn't just an abuse of power, but it's a neglect and a negligence of care too. And so it's part of understanding that when I wake up in the morning, when I decide that I'm going to leave my house, the worst thing that I can imagine happen to me is being killed by the police or by vigilantes for mistaken identity or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. When I get pulled over, I have to consider not that, oh, this is an inconvenience and I'm going to get a ticket. I have to consider that this might be the last moments of my life. When I go somewhere, I have to make sure that I'm wearing my Apple Watch and maybe that I have my AirPods in, because I need to be respected and to have people understand that when I'm walking around the store, I make enough money to not have to steal.
Wow, that's crazy. That's insane.
And so black anxiety is knowing that no matter how the fact that I have to also know that in any situation, I have to be non-threatening, especially with police. Even if I'm in the right, I have to pretend that I'm in the wrong, and I have to be accommodating and have to be non-threatening.
You have to disprove a negative the moment you walk out.
The presumption of innocence, it's waking up every day knowing the presumption of innocence doesn't apply to me. It's living in an open carry state and feeling that as a black man, my Second Amendment right would be a death sentence for me because of that presumption of innocence. The presumption that my use of a gun is for self-defense and not for criminal activity is not granted in the way that it would if I were a white man. And
What's
so
your bottom floor is eggshells, is what you're saying. Like,
I'm in Georgia, and before that I was in North Carolina, both of which are open carry states where the Second Amendment is heavily encouraged and advocated for, but it doesn't apply to us unilaterally and equally in a society where you literally have video footage of a 12-year-old, 14-year-old boy, I believe it was Tamar Rice, who was gunned down playing in a park with a toy gun, something that no white parent would ever have a doubt or a thought about their child doing. Playing cowboys and Indians is what it was when I grew up. And so that is a death sentence. Playing outside with a toy gun is a death sentence for a black child. It is letting your child play outside for a black parent is wondering if they're going to leave the house a human being and fail to come back and become a hashtag. That's black anxiety. Black anxiety is knowing that when you walk outside, that life is very different for you through no fault of your own, and that there's nothing you can do about it, and no matter how much money you make, no matter how privileged you become, no matter how much you fuel the engine of meritocracy, no matter what your contributions, you will always be treated as a second-class citizen if you're lucky, and at worst, a threat, and your life is inconvenient to somebody else's authority or comfort. Yeah. Your very existence is an inconvenience at best and a threat at worst. Wow. That is black anxiety. That is the black experience. That is something that I have to ask you, do you wake up every morning thinking that?
Nope.
No, absolutely not. Do you feel at times like this, Roberto, that is becoming amplified, or do you feel a sense of community? Like, is the anxiety heightened because it's reopening old wounds? Yeah, both.
It's both, because it is reopening old wounds. Me, I actually personally was the victim years ago of vigilante justice and racial profiling and mistaken identity. A nondescript black guy who, as it turns out, was literally 6 inches taller than me and like 2 or 3 shades lighter than me with a completely different haircut, shoots up the bar that I'm at. I run out the back of the bar where a lot of people get separated from them, end up in an alley trying to call the cops, and then 5 dudes say, hey, that guy's the shooter. It was a black guy. And I do everything to try to defuse the situation and to de-escalate everything, and I'm like, look, I'm literally calling the cops, and they're like, nah, you're calling your ride. And it's like, and they all the accusations, where's the gun, like trying to hold me down and like pat me down and like, where'd you ditch it, where like this whole thing, and they're amped up, and this is a military town. All these dudes are like jacked, and it's like, and so I literally managed to hold my own. I couldn't fight back. The thing is, you're trying to stay alive in that situation. I'm a little guy. I'm 5'7". It's only because of some of my own training and some of my own martial arts background, and because I actually lived next door to a law enforcement officer who actually gave me some additional training, that I was able to physically survive that encounter with no life-threatening and no life-scarring, debilitating injuries or anything. But it was a really damn near thing, and it's just a matter of the fact that I stopped the blows that would do it. And eventually, one of my friends, who was a white bouncer for the bar, came upon us and ran them off. And when he was running them off, I was alone, and I stumble out the alley, and what happens? I try to flag down this lovely white couple for help, and the dude is yelling at me, the girl is screaming, and they push me away. Instead of seeing me as somebody that needs help and a victim, I'm a threat, and I'm begging for help, and they push me away, and they go on about their thing. I flag down the police officer in his car. Oh, thank God. And no, oh, thank God. The cop is sitting there not treating me in any humane way, doesn't come out of his car and refuses to come out of his car and check on me or to hear me or anything like that, makes me walk alongside his car back to the bar downtown where my white friends vouch for me. And then, and only then, does he change his tune and stop treating me like a suspect or a perp, and barely tries to treat me like a victim and get my statement. And when I get to the hospital, it is the same damn thing, because when they jacked me up, they also took my keys, my wallet, everything, and stuff like that. And so I don't have my Social Security card, and and I don't have my health insurance card. And so they treat me practically like a homeless person. They do almost nothing for me. They do give me my CT scan and they do that, but in terms of cleaning me up and giving me anything, like, no care and no compassion.
I mean, you just
even with
feel
my friend who
alone.
works at the hospital vouching for me. This is my experience. And every time I scroll in Twitter or Instagram, I'm re-subjecting myself to the actual lived experience of this every minute, which is why I've had to somewhat stop that and beg people to put positive things out that I could scroll through, that I can bookmark. And so, yes, it's relived trauma, but this is also the actual reality of what people go through when this happens, and why we have to say things like Black Lives Matter, and we have to say things like justice for George Floyd, and all these things, and enough is enough. We have to say these things because I don't think you can imagine an experience or any interaction you've had with law enforcement playing out this way. And the thing is, that's why we can't trust them sometimes to know, did we get a good cop? Did we get a bad cop? Did we get someone who is actively racist and bigoted, or just somebody who's going to neglect us?
And speaking of binary thinking, I mean, good cop, bad cop, it's like the few bad apples line that everybody likes to use. It's like, well, yeah, there's some really, really bad apples. There's a whole lot more apples that maybe aren't totally rotten to the core, but they still got some holes in them, and they're still not something you'd want to, bite into for a delicious snack. So I feel like it's like the problem is so complex and so widespread that, it's touched an entire community of people and then left other people to just be completely oblivious to it.
Yeah.
Which leads back to what you're talking about with that cognitive dissonance, being able I don't understand it. I mean,
we have no presumption. We have to live with the anxiety of, like, unless we end up being a hashtag, we're not going to get justice. I didn't get justice. It was a small military town. We found one of the guys, and it was 4 white guys and 1 Hispanic guy, and guess who ends up being the fall guy? The Hispanic guy. And he's the only one who came forward and turned himself in, and he refused to turn in his 4 buddies. And their excuses, they were drunk, they thought they had the right guy. Having the right guy doesn't give you the right to take matters into your own hands. You are not above the law, and you are not the law. And they thought they were doing their due diligence and their duty and everything, excuse after excuse. But the thing is, I couldn't trust even going after and pursuing things, because they were like, well, you can press charges against him. But the thing is, somebody in his crew, because they never returned my things, someone in his crew had my phone, my contact list, my ID, and knows where I live. And it's a small town and a small community,
and nobody gives
it's
a
a military
shit.
town. And can I trust that there's no retribution? Can I trust that, if you don't get all of them? And then the thing is, even if you get all of them, well, how are their buddies going to react and everything like that? So you can't, in a lot of times, you know that there's no justice for you because you know you're not in a framework, you're not in an environment that is about justice for all and is not about everybody having an equal experience or an equal opportunity. And the thing is, if you're black or if you're Latino, you know that. If you're a woman, like, look, I'm a dude. I don't sit there and I don't think every time I walked out my door, that on the list of the worst things that can happen to me, it doesn't really cross my mind that I'm going to be raped in a bathroom somewhere. But the thing is, it is the thing that I fear every time my sisters walk out the door. So when you consider that, like, that's the difference of, okay, the privilege exists in knowing that that's not your truth and that's not your reality, and that it wouldn't cross your mind that that's what would happen to you.
Thank you for sharing that, Roberto, because that sounds like literally a nightmare, and I can't even begin to understand that. But thank you for sharing that with us. That's a very powerful fucking thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like not to speak for you, but when you talk about the privilege of the situation, like it wasn't just the cops in that scenario. It was your fellow man, and then it was a nice couple walking down the street, which is the rest of society, and then the hospital, like all of it all together. And you're right, I don't like in every single one of those steps. I mean, I would assume, and that I would get the better version of that.
I was friends with the
care,
owner,
all of it.
I was friends with the owner of that bar. I was friends with the management of that bar. Later to find out, I mean, they did try to like help out in some ways, but they also wanted most of this to go away because he personally had some unrelated shady stuff where he just didn't want cops around. And we all found that out like years later when he left town and stuff like that. So it was this it's this thing where at every single level, every single level where a human being could have done the right thing or had empathy or had compassion or looked at the situation and saw their fellow man in need failed me. And it fails people like me every single day at a systemic level at every aspect of our society. And in some cases it's abuse, and in other cases it's neglect. And all of it is rooted in a lack of empathy and a lack of understanding and a lack of benefit of the doubt. And the thing is, you can change as many laws as you want, and that will help. And you can hold people accountable, and that will help. But until people are willing to change how we operate and think as a culture, as a society in this country and at scale in the world, and we all move the needle on humanity, our inner humanity, and until, frankly, we have a more educated class of people as a baseline for society, there'll be more victims like George Floyd. There will be more victims like, Eric Garner. There'll be like Eric Reed. There'll be more